Welcome back to the Hopelessly Gifted podcast. I'm your host, Mark Talaga. All right, guys, today I have with me somebody very near and dear to me. It's Dani, who is my producer on the show, believe it or not. Talk about nepotism, right? No, not really. But no, Dani and I were chatting the other day about her experience growing up gifted. And I thought it was just a lovely way of how she experienced that in her own life and what she took away from it. Dani, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to the listeners out there?
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Dani. I grew up in an area in Chicago, or rather in Illinois, Arlington Heights. That's where I went to high school, grew up there, and then moved to Toronto in Canada to go to college. I studied psychology and neuroscience, and I really got into some stuff with Hispanic linguistics as well. And I just graduated this January. So I am a recent graduate. Now I've been working with Mark, as he mentioned. So kind of coming out of the behind the scenes for popping in to say hello. If you ever email the Hopelessly Gifted email account, which you should if you have questions, it'll be me that you're talking to. But been working with Mark for a little over a year now. We're coming up on a year and a half. But
Yeah.
I also, since graduating, recently started working as a behavioral therapist with kiddos with autism. So that's been a really cool, challenging new chapter for me that I've
Oh,
been doing for the
first of
last.
all, congratulations to you. You're doing amazing stuff, and I love having you around. And, um, you know, talk about were you one of those kids that was called out as gifted? Did you get diagnosed? I always think that's a funny way to phrase it, but did that happen for you?
Yeah, I mean, it happened in more subtle ways. I wouldn't say there was ever a point where somebody pulled me into a room out of class and said, "You are gifted, and this is what that means." But I would say, starting in around third grade when they started doing those standardized tests, I think they called it like the MAP tests.
Right.
It was just to assess our overall academic performance. Once we started doing those and they started showing me my scores and where I fell on the standard deviations, that's when I really started to understand, like this is now going to be a big part of how the adults in my world treat me, and the way that I get to experience school is going to be a little bit different. So when I started being placed in accelerated pathways for classes, that's kind of when I felt the experience of being diagnosed. But it wasn't really like we're going to get neuropsych testing and
Right.
this is what your processing scores look like, this is what your IQ is. It was never anything like that, but there were signs sort of subtly throughout my development.
But I want to go back a little bit. The idea that you recognized as early as third grade that this would shift how people would interact with you, that's something you were aware of at the time, or is that something you look back on and kind of could feel it?
Yeah, well, it's hard to say. I wish I could, actually jump back into third grade little me, but I think it's definitely a little bit of both. Like retrospectively, I now know that that is the case because,
Mm.
of course, hindsight is 2020. But I think in the moment, I did sort of feel this shift of like, oh, like I'm leaving the classroom where all my friends are for math and for science and for different like reading tests where they want me to spell words for them, and my friends didn't get called out to do that. So I started noticing things like that. And you would hear other little things like on the other side of things where it's not talking about the way that I was excelling, where the adults in my life would sort of unsuccessfully be whispering about behaviors that I had that they thought were attention seeking or things like that, that were sort of kind like, oh, I'm kind of different. Like there's something off about the way that I am relative to my peers, the people around me.
Do you feel like that you somehow, because the question that a lot of people ask is, are we creating this awareness that the kid is different, or does the kid already feel
Hmm.
different?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think that, I mean, giftedness, as you know, and if you're a listener of this podcast, you know this very well. Giftedness is not a monolith. So, like, my experience is not going to be representative of every gifted person, nor is any one experience. But I definitely think that over the course of your development, especially as you start getting into adolescence and those regions of your brain that are super responsive to social feedback and social input start getting super duper heightened in puberty, you're going to start to really, really have a spotlight on your relative position socially towards other people. Before that, I feel like if there were no feedback or input from the adults in our lives, we might not notice as much that we are so different, or that we fall on the extremes of the bell curve, if you will, in these domains. We might not pick that out unless it's something that's, super apparent, like some people are on the extreme ends of the physical development where they're just like shooting up in like second or
Sure.
third grade. So things that are visible like that, yeah, I'm sure that they're that's particularly salient to them from a young age. But in my experience, I don't think that I probably would have thought about it or felt about it as much if it weren't for me being told those data points earlier
It's
on.
interesting because, like, I totally get that, and I think that it definitely exacerbates this awareness of there's a shift. But even like when you said like you had to go into another class and like you were spelling words for other people, like, this idea that other people weren't getting what you were getting
Mhm.
relatively quickly, at least for me, kind of created this, like, it didn't make me feel different. It didn't make
Mhm.
me feel like, oh, I'm a weirdo, but it was definitely something where maybe deep down I was like, why doesn't everybody just get this?
Right. Well, it started planting seeds because it was like I'm starting to notice that I maybe have this gift, like this something that makes me super exceptional, and like this is how I'm going to gain social rewards. This is how I'm going to gain the praise from the people that are telling me what to do, and so obviously that's the most important thing in my world. So those were like the initial seeds being planted of me kind of having. An identity surrounding being really good academically, being really
Yeah.
good intellectually. That was something that started to become an important part of what I thought about myself. And it kind of snowballed increasingly throughout my development. But yeah, definitely, it's not like you feel like, oh, I'm this alien, something's wrong, or it's just you do notice, you pick it up, and it might not be like you come home and you're like, this happened today, mom, and now I'm gifted. But you definitely notice it, and it's a maybe a slow burn, but yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's a big spectrum of range of that level of awareness
For
of,
sure.
why is nobody else thinking this is funny or easy or hard or
Yeah,
whatever it
yeah.
is. Um, and then how did your parents, you know, how do they fit into the mix? Do they, I mean, obviously they're supporting you, but the idea of like, um, do they feel like they pushed you, they challenged you, they wanted more from you? I don't know. What was that like for you?
Yeah, so I'm the youngest of three, and I think there's some research about birth order and how it impacts the way that your parents treat you. But, I was in a full house, and my parents obviously supported me. They always have. But I think that a lot of the times it was just like, oh, we're going to, she's a little quirky. We're going to let her be how she's going to be. If she needs something, if she's upset, we're going to figure out what's going on. We're going to talk to her. But they didn't really ever try to put pressure on me to extract as much as they could out of my intellect. They were never telling me that like this was really important, that I, maximize this. And it was just kind of like, hey, the report cards coming home are saying, she's a little chatty, she can't really sit still, but her grades are good. She's excelling on these tests, and so, we have a smart, quirky kid and we love her, That was kind of what it was when I was younger. And even as I got older, they were never parents who put a lot of pressure on me to perform well in school or to bring good grades home. It was really just important to them that I tried my best and that I was feeling happy. So yeah, I really appreciate that perspective from them. And honestly, like and we can circle back to this, but I'm kind of glad that I never ended up getting like neuropsych testing or, processing assessments done or like IQ testing done, because I was listening to a previous episode of your podcast talking about how like kids knowing those numbers and understanding where they fall can almost be like a double-edged sword where it's feeding into uh, that identity that they are kind of being given,
Right.
where it definitely probably would have made me overthink it, and it would have made me think about, okay, well, I need to make sure that I do this, and this to make sure that all of my output is aligned with where I'm supposed to be excelling and where
Right.
these numbers say that I should
How
be
do I
excelling.
maximize?
Yeah, yeah.
How about this though? Do you ever feel like you wish your parents did push you more in any area?
Well, like that's an interesting question. And I guess I've never really thought about it in that way. They definitely pushed me to think about what I want in life. They
Hmm.
definitely pushed me to think about the things that I could see myself doing. And they pushed me in the sense that like they would never spoon feed me things. Like um, if I asked them what a word meant, they would tell me to go find a dictionary and figure it out. Like they were like,
See, yeah, skill
yeah,
development. That's
and
good.
even when I was younger, as far back as I can remember, they wouldn't, use child-directed speech with me. They wouldn't water down the vocabulary they were using toward me. They would use big words with me, and they would use like metaphor-ridden language with me, and I just kind of had to like go along with it until I started understanding the expressions as my language developed.
Hmm.
And so I think in that way, they kind of always pushed me because they never they didn't do anything like age inappropriate, but they never really treated me like a kid in the way that
Right.
you like infantilize or look down on kids. They kind of expected that I would, step up to the occasion and join them where they were at. So I think they pushed me a lot in that way, but maybe they could have pushed me a little bit more to try a sport, because every time I tried,
Sure.
both of my siblings are extremely athletic, and my dad is very athletic. So they were always at sports practices, and they were kind of trying to encourage me to be like, try softball, try volleyball. And I was always kind of scared. Like I would go to practice and I would be embarrassed. It's kind of vulnerable to be like doing the warm ups in front of other people, and like, I don't know. It's a new environment, and I felt like a fish out of water, and I just never felt like that was my domain really. And so that was one thing they maybe could have pushed me to be like, okay, give it a full season before you decide you're going to quit. But other than that, I think that they pushed me a pretty good amount, but who's to
Yeah.
say? Yeah.
Well, no, I like what you're saying is they were alongside you and it wasn't about how they did things for you. It was
Hmm.
more about how they instructed you to figure out what you needed for yourself. And at that age in your life, it was you could do it and that was fine and you went along with it. And that's a great way to be there
Yeah.
and to challenge you without making it a direct challenge.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So when do you feel like the wheels may have started to come off for you around your intelligence, your ability, and things got a little dicey?
Yeah, I definitely think that I mentioned that sensitive time period during puberty when we are completely wired to be super aware of our position relative to everyone around us. Social feedback is like a siren in our brains, like anything that we're hearing. So I would say around then, like around middle school, I continued to be in like that accelerated pathway for math, science, and English language arts. I think so. I was in like the grade above or the grade above those classes for um, middle school. And that's, I would say, also around the time that discussions about college admissions and college applications really started to ramp up. And it was kind of being presented to me that, okay, like, this is when you're going to start developing the skills to do as much work as you possibly can so that you are the ideal candidate for these really, really competitive, impressive universities that you're going to eventually want to get into. And I think that that started making more structure to the perfectionism that I was already sort of feeling around school, that provided a sort of end goal, like an end of the road for what the purpose of all of this uh, intellect was and where I should be orienting towards in order to really like wring the towel out of all of my intellectual juices.
Hmm.
Um, and, you know, it was never really told to me that like if you don't do well in school, it's going to be super detrimental and horrible. And so I don't want to present the school system as if it's this evil terrible thing for putting kids who can perform at a higher level in certain classes in higher level classes, but I definitely think that the way that it's framed is maybe not transparent enough about like, oh, this is just a more appropriate level for you. It's not just because you're some super genius who could never do anything wrong in school. It's just because, you know, you seem to like, we want to make sure that you're not bored in class or something like that. Like, I kind of wish that I had more of those types of discussions because ultimately the transition to high school did feel like I was going to combust. Like I had never experienced that level of, um, oh my gosh, it's a slap in the face. This is my first run in with like, I'm having this huge conflict of the identity that I have as someone who's supposed to be super exceptional and smart. And I don't know how to deal with this. I don't have the language to explain this conflict that I'm having. It's like, I'm suddenly in all these AP classes that I should be able to perform well in. I've been on this track the whole time, but now like I'm kind of struggling to keep up. The volume of stuff that I'm expected to do is like fourfold from what it was.
Right. So you were now experiencing a level of demand and
Yeah,
challenge that
yeah,
you were feeling, you started to feel a little pressure
yeah.
around keeping up with that.
Oh yeah,
Um, yeah, okay. And so, this idea, it's interesting. I kind of want to explore this a little bit. The idea that there was a presentation of this is how you get to this level of school, and there's a way to get there, and
yeah.
here's the path, and down that path you went. Thinking back and knowing who you are now, do you feel like that was in line with what you wanted for yourself, or was that, kind of just an assumed goal because you were smart?
Yeah, I think a little bit of both. Like
Yeah,
I think that we have these cultural scripts that we hear from a young age, and it's kind of the anchoring points that we use to make sense of our world and to understand what is an example of a successful life, a successful development. And a big archetype in that cultural script is you go to school, you go to high school, you get good grades, you get into college, you do well in college, and then you get a great job and you do your career. That's kind of like the main broad archetype. And so
right.
I kind of like before I even was presented with this sort of pathway of like, okay, we need to start thinking about how you're going to craft your college application when you're in seventh grade. I was still probably feeling like that was something that I was wanting or something that was
Sure.
aligned with who I was. Because at that point, you know, you don't really have anything other than comparing yourself to some standard or comparing yourself to some your peers or to your family members that helps you understand who you are and like what being a person really means.
Right.
Like when you're that age, you really do use comparison as your basis for understanding who you are and what you want and what your values are. You know, you don't have
Yeah.
enough. I mean, obviously, you are your own person. You can have the agency to construct your identity and really be an individual. So I don't mean to say that like the identity doesn't exist when you're that age, but just I think that it did feel aligned, probably because I grew up feeling like that was the natural order of things. Even yeah.
This is going to be a weird question. What did
Yeah.
you want to be when you grew up when you were younger?
Okay, so this is a fun one. for me to answer because it has had many turns and twists. When I was really young, I wanted to be like a veterinarian or someone who washed and groomed animals. Like I really
Okay.
wanted to work with animals. I've always had like a really special connection to animals. I'm someone who has always needed to stop if there's a dog or a squirrel or whatever and say hi and, make little high pitched squeals at it. I still do. So love animals, always have. That was what I really wanted to do when I was younger.
Hmm.
As I got older, like around fourth, fifth grade, I really wanted to be a pop star, a singer.
Heck
Uh,
yeah.
yeah, you know what? Performance was for me. I was always a very extroverted kid. So, put me on the stage wherever I can get the most attention. That's what I wanted. But then I started watching Grey's Anatomy some point in middle school or early high school. And I decided I was going to be a cardiothoracic surgeon. That was my
Oh,
plan.
that was it. You
That was
you
it.
nailed
That
it.
was,
Okay.
yeah. So I told my parents about it, and they were like, "Oh, medical school. Oh, okay." And so I was
Yeah.
like, "Right, that is a long time." And then I really started thinking about the amount of school that it would be, and I was watching the show, and I'm like, they don't really ever get breaks, do they? And so then I was
They
like,
don't
"Okay,
get, what did you say? They don't get praised?
they don't get breaks. They don't get
Oh,
breaks."
breaks. I've heard praised. I was like, well, that seems important. They don't
So
get breaks. Okay. Okay.
they don't get breaks. They have to work these 20-hour shifts or whatever. And I was like, yeah, maybe I'll pivot a little bit. Maybe I'll move out of that world. But honestly, I think it was really when I started therapy when I was in middle school and kind of going into high school that I was like, I like what my therapist does for a living. I like talking to her. I think I could do that. I don't really know if I'm able to do that right now, but I could learn. And then I started becoming obsessed with the mind and obsessed with human behavior and abnormal psychology. And I just wanted to learn as much as I could about it. And from that point, it was really like, okay, I want to be in the psychology world. I want to be in the behavioral world. I want to help people. I want to connect with people on a deeper level. And that is what I ended up pursuing. But who knows? I can
You
always
can
change.
always change. Well,
Yeah.
it's funny because you think of this idea of somebody who wants to be on stage, wants to be a pop
Mhm.
star. And how often does it happen where the parents are like, well, then let's get you voice lessons in. Let's make sure college is not really something we have to worry about because
Right.
we're going to have you be that. Like, we'll
Right.
help you be that. You know, it's now, first of all, I didn't even know you were a singer. Do you sing?
I don't. I was like 8, and I was singing in my bedroom, and I was forcing my family to sit in the family room and listen to my performances.
I
But I
love
was
it.
very tone deaf. I mean, hearing the videos back, it was a little bit of a delusional dream of mine. But hey, you're right. You're right
Careful who you're
though.
talking to. I'm all
If
about potential.
it's true. It's true. Like that's what I mean. If they had, taken that and been like, "Oh, she seems to really like this. Let's get her into voice lessons." Who knows? And I was also in some theater productions like for
Yep.
summer camps. So I think that was really the where I would draw back to because I would be like, "I'm going to be the lead next time, so I need to really practice." But it wasn't ever really something that I was super great at. Like I was always pretty middle of the road in terms of how well I could hear my own voice. But
Well, yeah. And
yeah.
well, it's, you look at it as, all of those aspects of you are still you, right?
Oh
And
yeah.
there's different, as we talk about all the time, there's different identities that you're
Of
creating.
course.
But isn't it, yeah, it's interesting that the tendency is to focus on just the career. Now, whether you wanted to do that as a career or not is kind of doesn't matter. It's more
Right.
like, how do you help children develop all the parts of themselves, right?
Yeah.
All these areas where they want certain things and want to express themselves in certain ways, but
Yeah.
sometimes it just gets relegated to school, college,
Yeah.
job, and
Yeah.
then kind of muted.
Right.
Um, did it ever? I have to imagine, I could be wrong, and I'm going to stick on this voice thing for a little longer.
Yeah. Yeah.
That part of you, even now, has this thought of taking voice lessons.
Yeah. Like it's interesting you say that. Like I'm definitely a car and shower singer. And
Yeah.
sometimes, my partner will be like, wait, that was really good. Like,
Ah,
and so
see?
I'm like, okay, like I do feel validated in it sometimes when I hear
Good.
myself and I'm like, okay, like I hit that run and it was good. So yeah, for sure. Like I am always open to going back to things that I have done in the past and trying them again, or even just trying something new. It's just always hard to get yourself to start. That's the hardest part for everything because it is
Hmm.
pretty vulnerable. Singing, particularly, is pretty vulnerable, especially if you're going to do it around other people. But I think that's what makes it really exciting and alluring. Like, you want to push yourself in that way because things that are scary and vulnerable in that way end up really, really being the most rewarding when you actually go for it and dive into it. So yeah, you know what?
Yeah.
You might have
Hmm.
just inspired me. I
I
might just
maybe I did, and it's my in my the comedy part of my brain is like, okay, well, let's hear a song and
all
two,
right.
three, four. No, you don't get to sing on mic.
Oh,
Um, but it's what it's this interesting thing that when we're looking at gifted children, we're looking at how we support them. It's like we want them to be everything that they are,
oh
but
yeah.
we also try to protect them from going down paths that maybe they're not managing their own expectations around.
Yeah, yeah,
And it's not about, oh, well, she wants to be a pop star, so she's going to be famous, and that's the goal. It's more
right.
like something about Dani wants to be seen and heard and
Yeah,
enjoys that level of connection.
yeah,
And where do we help her find more of that,
yeah,
as
yeah,
well as the other part where she's doing really well in school?
yeah.
Um, this may be too personal, and honest to God,
No,
just say I don't want to answer it.
yeah,
Um, you mentioned that you went into therapy in middle school, and
yeah.
I did as well. But so something was going on to the point where you needed extra levels of support. Was that in relation to just the demand and overwhelm of school, or what was going on?
Yeah, I think like around eighth grade going into high school, it was definitely like a darker time for me in my mental health world. I don't know exactly how related it was, and I'm sure everything is related. I take that back.
Everything's connected.
Everything is related. So
Yeah.
the ideas that I had about like being afraid of underwhelming myself and underwhelming the
Mm,
people around me who had these concepts of who I was as a student and as an intellect in general. But I was starting to have these feelings of like, oh, I'm kind of like disinterested in the things in my life and the things that I really love. And like I didn't really have the language for it or friends around me that had used words like depression. It felt like a
right.
scary, bad word. And so I don't know, but it had been a while where I was like, this is not right. This is not how I used to feel. This is not how life is normally supposed to feel. And I was just kind of like less interested in attacking life the way that I really used to. I was less engaged. I didn't want to get up. I didn't want to hang out with my friends. And those were things that I was usually like the pioneer of. So it was kind of like, okay, well, I don't really know how to do this. I don't know what's going on, but I'm going to talk to my parents. And it's a really beautiful thing that like, that's something I felt like I could do. And
That is nice. Yeah.
they were never, you know, I know that there's lots of like cultural scripts going back to that about mental health and feeling like there's something really defective about your kid if they have something going on with their mental health that needs intervention. So it was never that culture in our house where we had a fear of asking for help or saying something was wrong. So I felt really appreciative that, of course, my talking to them landed on the most welcoming ears and loving ears. And they were like, okay, we're going to find you a therapist
That's cool.
and we're going to see how it goes. And if you don't like her, we'll find you a new one. So, I started going to therapy and it was wonderful. It was a great experience. And, throughout high school, it really, really helped me stay grounded. And ultimately, I ended up getting onto medication, which was something that I needed, but
Yeah.
it was something that we ended up talking about a lot with my therapist, my family. Everyone was involved in that conversation. And it's hard to get yourself to feel like, oh, am I really going to be dependent on like a biochemical intervention to make myself feel like I can get out of bed and go do normal life things when there's not really like a clear justification for it in my environment. Like it felt really difficult to feel like, oh, you have no real reason to be
Well, see,
having.
that's what's so interesting because you're totally right. Like this is
Yeah.
a very common experience
Yeah.
where there's this idea of I shouldn't really need something because nothing is externally really wrong, and
Yeah, yeah,
maybe
yeah.
it's just my mindset or something like that. But again, if you go to that place of feeling like I wasn't going to be able to do enough, in some aspect, whether it's I couldn't be there for my friends in the way I want to be there, or I couldn't,
Yeah.
perform, or what if I don't, and a lot of fear around that.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
this idea that it's rooted in some level of developmental challenge,
Yeah, yeah.
and whether that got identified or not, what you're talking about is kind of cool, because you're talking about how building a relationship with another person
Yeah.
outside of your family was still healing and helpful and able to move you through.
Yeah. I mean, it was the only real outlet that I had to feel like there was a non-participant in my immediate family dynamic that was putting a name to these things that I had kind of just internalized for so long, and was just kind of telling me to say more, telling me to talk more about it. And I think that's something that, like, you can't understate the power of just like having your kid like talk more about the things that they're feeling, even if they don't have the right words. Like, ask non-combative questions that like get them to question their own frameworks and their own experiences, and through that experience. And I mean, obviously this is the point of therapy, they don't need to explain it, but like saying the things out loud that like maybe you didn't think were the core parts of the problem, but you're just kind of explaining the course of like your own train of thoughts and the series of events that have happened, and now suddenly you're like, oh, now that I'm hearing myself, like it kind of makes a lot of sense. And you're at the same time, you're anticipating how the therapist is perceiving what you're saying. And you're like, wait, I think I just unlocked something. So it was an outlet for me to do that and to hear myself talk about these things that I never said before and that I never like
Yeah.
felt like I could. So yeah, that was
Well, and
definitely.
it's an interesting thing, because I'm going to bring it back to the family dynamic,
Yeah, yeah,
and your folks are lovely and supportive, and again, there's to all the parents out there that are working with your kids, and sometimes you hear like, oh, they're able to talk with somebody like me, or some
yeah,
another therapist, and am I not doing enough for them to feel comfortable to talk with me about these kind of things, and can I get this stuff out of them? And the reality is, it's not about what you're doing or not doing, but it is this environment where it allows for a skill development
yeah.
of expression and understanding that is just a little harder at home, because you know y- I don't think your parents ever told you they don't want you to talk more.
No, no, never.
Right.
Yeah, and can I say, like, they were super encouraging of me talking to them about these things. It's not about anything that they could have done differently or should have done differently. It's really just that, like, I have a specific relationship with them as my parents, and
Right.
at the time, it just felt like, we don't have this sort of precedent for me to now talk about these deeply personal things that you like our relationship, it's kind of in a different world from the
Hmm.
things that I am now able to unpack with this other person. And I think now looking back, my parents and I have had really profound conversations unraveling all of these life experiences that I've had, where I got to hear about their perspective when I was getting into therapy and their perspective throughout all of my development, like, and all of the challenges that I faced that like I wasn't able to talk to them about at the time, or like we didn't have the relationship where that was what we talked about.
Right.
uh, and now we've talked about all of those things, and it's brought us so much closer in my adult relationship with them, to hear where they were coming from and for them to know what I was feeling and that they weren't doing anything wrong. Like,
Correct.
it's been a really, really cool turn in my adult life to be
I
able
mean,
to.
I love that. It's such a good, moment of recognizing the hope that, there's, you might have a kid who feels like, they can tell you things, but
Yeah,
they feel more comfortable talking about certain aspects of their life with somebody else, or who's just a professional.
yeah,
Um, but then going back through that experience, and using your humanness of what it was like for both sides, and what you learned and what you were going about. I mean, that's everything.
oh yeah, yeah. No, that's been some of the most like pivotal conversations and super healing as well for both parties to go back and just actually reflect on the like you get to actually assume the position of the other person in retrospect, and it makes things come together in a really beautiful way. So there's always it's maybe not the time right now when your kid is not ready to talk to you about these things that they don't really know how to make sense of even themselves, and they don't know if you're going to understand, and they feel nervous because they have to come home to you, and they know they're anticipating that you are afraid that you're doing something wrong, and they know that. So I think,
Yeah.
it's not to say that you'll never have the conversations, it's not to say that they'll never unpack things with you, just it's not the time and the dynamic right now, and that's
Well,
okay.
and even knowing yourself, knowing
Yeah,
how empathetic you are, knowing how much you care about others, it makes me wonder if there was a part of you that was trying to protect your parents in a
yeah,
sense
yeah,
from that you were going through a hard time and you didn't want them to have to worry or
sure.
experience that. There's this part where really sensitive, gifted people
Yeah,
do that unconsciously.
yes,
It's not that they weren't willing or that they weren't able and they couldn't do it in the same way in the therapist's office, but some part of them doesn't want mom and dad to
yeah.
be maybe more worried than they already are.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I have old journal entries from when this was all happening of me literally saying that, being like, my parents are so amazing and hardworking, and they pour so much love into me, and they didn't do anything wrong. So I don't want to make them feel horrible that their kid is depressed, and like,
Right.
I don't want to make them feel like they have another thing that's going to stress them out, because I know they care. I know that this is going to be something they take seriously. So I know that it's going to be adding something to their plate. And I literally wrote down, like, I don't want to be a burden. Like, that
Yeah.
is such a crazy, like a common trope. And looking back, it's like, oh my gosh, you were not a burden. You were literally just being a person and using your support system. And as you should, you were a child. Like, you need to. So
Right.
obviously, like looking back, I know that, but it's a very common thing, and I definitely experienced that for
Well,
sure.
and I want parents to understand that even if you recognize that that's what's happening in your kid, and then you tell them like, you won't be a burden if you tell me everything you're
Right.
going
Yeah,
through, and you won't do that. You can recognize that maybe developmentally that's just too important to
yeah.
them,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
so you can be supportive of, well, okay, that's fine. You don't have to talk with us, but we
Yeah.
want you to talk with somebody. And
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
want you to be able to have that experience, and it doesn't have to be with us. And letting parents, let go of the idea that it has to be them for every aspect of that child's development. It
Yes.
doesn't. It takes a
It does.
village.
It takes a village. It really does. And it's not just that I'm talking to this third person that's not my parent. It's also that I'm talking to this third person who is a trained professional in analysis and evaluation, and like understanding how to properly reflect back my emotion and my trauma to me. And it's not that my parents would necessarily be bad at that. It's just that like they don't necessarily have the same tools. They don't necessarily have the same training and experience, and it goes a
Well,
long way.
and it's that part, but it's also like recognizing that that feeling of a burden mattered,
Of
and we're not going to
course.
take that away from you
Yeah.
as a child. That's important, and we can also recognize the love in that, and
Yes.
the empathy in that,
Yeah.
and it's a potential for what you're already doing, with your career in life, and but it's hard to see that in the moment. It's hard to look past your kid struggling, but it's okay. You know what I mean? Like sometimes kids need to hold on to this idea that, oh, I'd be a burden if I talked to you. Like, okay, well then sounds like you're not ready to talk with us. That's
Yes.
okay.
Exactly. It's still a feeling that I'm having, whether or not it's something that I, should be feeling ideally. It's a feeling that I'm having, and it should be honored either way. And I think that
Yeah.
like the best way to support your kid in that case is offering them options, and offering an outlet for them to access someone who they do feel comfortable in that moment for
Yeah.
now to talk to about these things.
Yeah, we always talk in the practice about how what it's really all about in our work. It's about expression, right?
For
Expression
sure.
of anything, right?
Yeah.
Expression of all these aspects of yourself, and how you find support for those different versions of expression is really, again, it's kind of like know what you're really trying to help your kid with,
Yes.
right? And yeah, sometimes kids don't have the words and the awareness to understand how to express their experience,
Yeah.
and a lot of gifted kids out there have a very similar experience to you, Danny. And sometimes that can feel very lonely. And we don't want to be afraid of that as parents,
Yeah.
that our child might struggle. Everybody has the right to be struggling.
Yeah.
Everybody,
Yeah.
kids as well.
Of course. Yes, of course. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's a huge thing. Yeah.
cool.
Every-
So let's go then to, you know, would it, knowing what you know about our practice, and you've been with us for a while now, why do you feel like a gifted, tailored counseling system is necessary?
Well, I mean, there are so many reasons. I think it's if you ever get the privilege of working with gifted kids or gifted population in a close way, you'll understand why it's necessary. It's like they have uh, just a vastly different range of internalizing information, of understanding their place in the world, of understanding their relationships with the adults and the other people in their lives. And it's just so important that you are able to provide them with someone who can see that and someone who can see them in an individual way and try to enter their world a little bit and try to make them feel seen in the parts of themselves that the bigger structures and the bigger systems, the normative systems that surround them for the majority of their lives don't see.
Right.
They don't really accommodate to see people who don't walk down the what is it, the beaten path.
Yeah, well, for sure. And you're talking about, because, and I don't know whether your therapist was trained in working with gifted kids or not, but
Mhm.
the idea is, what I like about your story is it doesn't always have to be gifted focus, even if the child is
Yeah.
on the world of gifted. But because some kids can figure out how to make anything work with
Yeah.
what they're
Yeah.
given, but it's when you come against something where the therapist is throwing their hands up, or let's say little Danny continued to decompensate and wasn't feeling much better at all, how
Yeah.
you have to broaden out your understanding of all the complexity
Yeah.
that can go into their neurodevelopment
Oh yeah.
and all those issues. But I like the idea that it doesn't have to be it doesn't need to be your first line of defense necessarily. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's more like, we want to be here for when that doesn't seem to be getting what the child might need.
Yeah. Yeah.
um yeah.
Definitely. I think that there were times, like she wasn't trained specifically in working with gifted people. And there were definitely times where she was like, all right, well, I'm sending you home with these techniques and these, mindfulness practices. And it feels like you're still kind of running into a wall here. And we would try to talk about it and unpack it. And we did go through periods where I was like, I don't know, like I feel like it's helpful. I'm getting a better visual of what this feeling is for me and where it might be coming from. But I think it wasn't really until my adult life, like in living away from home and like creating a life for myself outside of the context of my parents and my household, where I was like, oh, a lot of that had to do with this perfectionism that I felt and this unwillingness I have to fail or be seen failing, and this rigid definition I have of what failure means. And it really wasn't until much later that I was able to understand the role that my giftedness played in a lot of the
Right.
darkness that I was experiencing. And I think that it does take time for, if you don't have resources like the Center for Identity Potential, it does take a lot more time to really start to make those connections and start to understand how executive functioning comes into the conversation.
Oh, for
I
sure.
think
It's
that's
sometimes not until we're in our 30s pointing
yeah,
at myself and
yes,
starting to really piece it all together. But I think, your story is very reflective of, again, I know there's a lot of parents listening out there, and I love your story because I want them to understand it through the perspective of Danny's parents, who are wonderful, lovely people and who are supportive and doing the right things. And maybe we'll do an episode where we talk with them and
ah,
get more of their experience.
I would love, they would love that.
I know
They
they would.
would love that. Yes.
Yeah. But the idea is, it's about keeping yourself grounded and rooted in what it
Yeah.
means to be with a child who may be struggling or sees the world differently, and to not take it all on yourself.
Yes. Yeah.
And, Dani, why don't you put the fine point on this?
Yeah.
What is the most important thing that parents need to do for their kid, no matter what the situation?
Well, I mean, love your kid. You
Yeah,
already do it. The things that
right.
you need to do the most for your kid are the things that you're already doing. Likely, if you're a listener of this podcast or a listener to other similar types of content, you're already filling your spare time or your driving time when you could be listening to music with something that you can try to use to learn how to approach your child in a more inviting way or in a way that helps them activate their potential in the best ways that they can. So just continue with that. Make yourself an open door for them to come to, and just show them through as many ways as you can that you care and that you want to learn. You want to understand what they're dealing with and what they're feeling. And the rest will truly fall into place. That feeling is the very core. It's like the infrastructure of my relationship with my parents. And I think that, like, looking back, there were certainly things that could have been done that weren't, and maybe couldn't have been done that were done. But
Hmm.
I really just don't think about those isolated events anymore, because I just remember that I always had an environment of people who wanted to help and who loved me unconditionally, and just that is the biggest thing that has made our relationship. I mean, I'm so close with my parents. I know that, like,
Yeah.
not everyone is as lucky to have such gems as in their corner, but it really is that is the best thing that you can do for them. And
It's absolutely true. And if you are a parent who is giving that unconditional love and support, but your child is still struggling, there's two things from what Dani just said to remember. One is they will remember that love. I promise you
yes,
that. But two, if it feels like nothing's getting better, it's about finding that support,
yeah,
whether it's for yourself or for that child. But it is a matter of knowing that what you have to give and what you have within you already have everything you need. You have
yes,
every tool you need if you love those kids and are working hard to make them know that that's the case.
yeah,
And when you're struggling as a parent because things aren't getting better, then yeah, you expand your team and you
yes.
make your team a little bigger.
Yes. I mean, my parents had no idea what to do. They were like, my kid is freaking out and panicking every night because she's afraid that she's going to not do well on a test. Like, what is this? I've never seen this before. They didn't know what to do. I mean, it's super scary. And there are definitely points where it felt like we're stuck. I don't know. There's no way for me to refer to somebody and ask about this. So they needed to, expand their team. They needed to delegate. And that was the only way that, like, I was able to have that outlet, and them taking that action and accepting that that was what we needed to do really made me feel so much more supported and loved by them, not even by the other person. It was like their
Right.
willingness to step up and take action if when it needed to happen. I mean, that was them communicating how much they cared and they wanted to understand. So that was everything for sure.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, let's end on that, Danny. I mean, I really appreciate you sharing a lot of, your own story today. And it's not
Yeah.
always easy to be vulnerable, but you're a natural. You
Thank you.
like, being that pop star part of you is still coming out. Um, and so, yeah, I want to thank you. And then, yeah, as always, if you have questions for the podcast, please go to hopelesslygifted.com. You can scroll down to the bottom for a place to enter in a question. I would love to answer more on air. That's my new focus right now. So if you can
Yeah.
hook me up and put those on there, that's great. Um, yeah, any last words, Danny?
Thanks for having me on my favorite podcast. This was
You're biased, but thank you. It
for
was a lovely
sure.
time. All right.
It
Thanks,
was.
everybody, and we'll catch you next time. Bye bye.